Ok. Eu vou falar em inglês por causa que é mais rápido para mim e assim não estou a traduzir de inglês para português, como moro em Londres. Eu trabalho em inglês, eu penso em inglês sobre estas coisas, portanto, a minha desculpa por ser um português, mas falar em inglês, mas acho que vocês percebem, se alguém me perceber algumas coisas, levanta a mão e eu explico em português outra vez. So what I'm going to present to you is the O2 platform, which is basically this thing that I have running here. And basically, the O2 platform is my attempt at codifying my application security knowledge, right? So my biggest frustration was that I used to do a lot of security assessments, I used to do a lot of security analysis, and I used to have the constant loop of finding problems, dropping a massive pile of PDF into the customer or the client, and then knowing that they barely understood what I was delivering, barely was able to replicate what I was giving to them. I was very happy because I've owned the system, found really cool vulnerabilities, and then come back 2 months later, and then the problem was still the same. Or when they fix it, they will fix it based on my examples, not actually, fix it properly. So they made sure that the examples that we gave them didn't work versus actually addressing the root cause of the problem. And what I realized was, what I wasn't doing is I wasn't codifying my brain and giving it to the customer. Right? What I wasn't doing is I was not grabbing the information that I had about the architecture of that application and then giving it to the customer, namely to the developer, so that they then could replicate, and more importantly, they could use that knowledge to fix the vulnerabilities. So the O2 platform, which allows you to create something like this. So I literally wrote this in the last, 25 minutes, Nuno is there, he saw the beginnings of it, this is the end of it. And this is basically a very kind of basic, fuzzing little script that does a login and applies a fuzzing to the login page, and then there's a bunch of analysis depending on what actually happened, right? Now, who here knows about Git or JIT? Como é que se diz Git em português? Git? Okay, who uses Git or knows about Git? Right? Who uses not Git, SVN or the other stuff? Okay, so the big thing about Git, once you start using it, is the first reaction is, I can do that with SVN, right? What's the fuss, whatever, right? But once you get your head around, there's always a moment when you go, but I couldn't do it like that, right? So this kind of scripting is the same thing, right? Both of you, if you script, you can write these things. What you probably can do is write at the speed, right? And the kind of the depth and the breadth that I've implemented in O2. Now, I don't particularly care that you guys use O2, right? What I care is that you guys use the workflow that I was able to now have O2. So I wrote O2 for me, right? The logic is, if I cannot be productive using O2, nobody is, right? And the reason why there is no O2 documentation, although there is a lot, there's about 190 blog posts of O2, right? Because I answer questions with the blog posts, is that my job is to make sure that the fundamental engine of O2 is rock solid. The key features of O2 is rock solid. And my job was to find a workflow that allowed me to find a vulnerability, codify it, give it to developers. And that's the workflow that we want, right? And that's where we're currently missing, because currently the developers don't receive from us that automation. They receive a unit test. If you have a friendly relationship, they might receive some nice words, some nice meetings. What they don't receive is automation. Because what I want to give developers is something like this. So this is basically a little tool that does a login, and in this case, just does a bunch of analysis. I'll just see if there's a problem here. Okay, so that's cool. So now I'm going to run the same script with SQL injection. So let me just run now the same thing. You guys get to see it in action. Oh, sorry, wrong script. It's going to be this one here. Yep, and then I'll explain in a second how that works. Anyway, that script. And where's the second? Alright, I'll open it again. And well, I explained the rest of the things. So here we go to script. So the other thing is, every time you write a little script, which is basically is C# but you feel more like Python, right? If you guys like Python or Ruby, I kind of create a bit of a C#-y, kind of Python-y kind of thing, which is kind of more like a strongly managed Python, right? Because I almost dumped the whole thing for Python because I really like the way Python allows to fastly prototype and the REPL and all that stuff. But then with the extension methods, I was able to create kind of the same thing. All right. So now I'm doing what I want to do here on basically the test, and now I'm basically doing the fuzzing, and it's just showing me a bunch of errors there, right? So what I want to do is I want to be able to give this to developers, right? This actually at the moment is not really vulnerable, which is good because we're not seeing the exploits. But this has the codification of the type of tests that I want to do, right? And that's very important because it allows me to scale, allows me to give the developers something that they can replicate. The other thing, and this is actually supposed to look better, just a second. This was supposed to, let's see if I can make it look better here. And there we go. Alright, so that's better. Okay, now you guys get to see the thing, right? See there's the animation of the, and you see I'm basically automating the logging process. You guys heard about Selenium and stuff like that? This is kind of equivalent of Selenium browser automation stuff, right? And I'll show you how I can write that script. And I'll show you how fast I can write that script. Because that's, again, the Git versus SDN thing. It's not just you can do it, it's how fast you can do it, right? And now the other thing I want to give developers is I want to give developers this, okay? Now, what this is these are unit tests that represent a whole number of vulnerabilities on an application. So instead of saying, oh, by the way, you had a vulnerability on your web services because you're forgetting to, let me take an example, you're allowing an attacker to change the profile, so there's a vulnerability, right? So first of all, just that is golden to a developer, because that is the codification of how the exploit can be replicated. But in this case, I'm going a step further, and I'm actually giving it as a unit test. In fact, what I'm doing is a very cool technique, is I'm giving them 2 unit tests. I'm giving a unit test that I expect to fail when the vulnerability is there, and I'm giving a unit test that I expect to pass when the vulnerability is there. So what's the developer's job is to make this one, which is red, go green, and that one go red. So if you look in this particular scenario, in this case, the difference is at the end. All right, so if you should be able to read this, right? So I'm getting account profile. I'm not logged in. You know, I'm able to update the account. I'm able to now check if the full name one is actually supposed to be updated. So that will be the first place I would expect it to fail if the thing was protected. In fact, I probably would expect to fail here, because why am I able to get the account profile of a particular user if I'm not logged in, which is of course another vulnerability, right? And then I also update again, and I confirm that in this case, that actually I got the reverse. So this is actually a test that is pretty robust, because it's confirming that yes, I can change it not once but twice. Because that's the other thing, I have to make sure that you actually have tests that are solid. And by the way, I'm a developer, right? I'm actually, although I have a background of security and I've done all the pen testing and code analysis and all that stuff, these days my day job is actually AngularJS, TeamCity, GitHub, unit tests, right? Development, which is pretty cool, right? I actually really enjoy being a developer. But I think I have also a better understanding of what it feels on the other side when I get given security reports, right? And I'm like, screw that, I want an automation test, right? Because I'm not going to buy that thing, right? Or when I'm basically turning around and says, you telling me that a GUID is not a valid session ID? You know, I'm not going to swear, right? But that's what I was really saying. No, sorry, GUIDs are very strong enough and you have to prove me enough, you know. But that's sometimes the irrational conversations we from security tend to have, right? But this is really important, because what this allows me to do, right, is allows me to codify a particular vulnerability. Now the problem here is, you know, I expect to probably have a balance here between buyers of security services and providers of security services. So if you basically, like him, is now going to become a buyer of security services. Like he's going to come from a guy that comes with a baseball bat and blows the ball out, right? You know, to the guy who's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You know, give me something I can consume, right? Because it's changing from pen testing to security director, right? Which is a big difference. And if you, on that role, what you have to do, if you're responsible for buying application security, Your job is to not accept PDFs. Right? Your job is to turn around to the people who are selling you PDFs and say, I don't want that. In fact, your job is to pay more, because if you look at your maths, it's more expensive to you to have your developers try to replicate what your security assessment says than it will be to pay another 20% or hire more guys for the team. Especially if those extra resources give you something that plugs into a unit test. Because I can tell you, as a developer, as somebody who actually hires developers, in fact, I'm hiring, by the way, if you guys want to work, right, on HTML and JavaScript and in a crazy environment, and you can work from home, you can go barefoot, right? You can basically wake up at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, it doesn't matter. You get paid by unit tests, right? So, and the company's in America, I'm in England, there's a dude somewhere in Asia, there's another guy in Ireland who just comes by a tour online sometimes, there's another guy somewhere in America, there's a guy in Costa Rica, so that's the team, right? But that's the real world. That's actually how all this stuff gets done now, right? And basically, you know, there's a real cost at replicating something. Every time you have a security assessment, every time somebody tells you there's a vulnerability, there's actually a physical dollar or error amount, right, to replicate that. And that's why if you as security professionals give that to the other side, you are much more valuable, right? So you can see here that what you actually have here is basically a whole bunch of security vulnerabilities on these applications. So if you look at this, you can see that I can log in with a weak account, I can brute force passwords, I can get account data, I can get account profile, I get the holdings, and I can change the profile there, right? And what's really cool about this type of vulnerabilities, I'm going to show you where I found them, and it's interesting where, usually that's where the vulnerability will be reported, but although I found the vulnerabilities on the client application, the vulnerabilities are actually on the web service, nothing to do with the client application. So let me give you the first interesting demo of O2, right, and the kind of stuff that we can do with O2, right? So this is a client application, right? So it's always great, right, when you're doing these demos to actually use, well, probably not a real-world app because you get sued quite spectacularly, right? But like one of those demo apps, right, that people actually use to teach. So this is Microsoft's, right? I don't know if you guys know the stock trader application. So this is a really enterprise app, really big, gazillions of stuff, very large code base. And this is basically an application that they use actually to beat up Java, right? And to say how mesh.NET is better than Java, because they managed to pass all the benchmarks, right? So it's basically a trade application, right? That you can come in here, you can connect, you can log into the thing, you can now log in with the user ID, and then I think password is like that, and then I can log in, and then I got my profile. You can see there's my information there, there's my account ID, there's my portfolio, there's my orders, right, and there's my quotes, etc., etc., right? So that's the client application. Now, normally, if you're pen testing this, the first thing you do is you say, oh, let me slap a proxy in the middle of this thing, right? Let me take a look at the traffic between, you know, the client and the server. Now, in this case, they're actually making it a little bit easy for you because the traffic is actually clear text, right? But usually, it's not, right? Usually, you know, it's either going to be on SSL, or in fact, this is .NET, you know, it's actually a configuration change to actually make this really hard and a pain in the ass to intercept, and if they even half clever, right? And in fact, it's actually even easier to fix, because, you know, there's a bunch of things that you can make sure that things are signed. So, put it this way, it's very hard to do it at here. And even if you do it here, even if you get given, right, this, in this kind of environment where it's just XML and you can manipulate it, you are kind of quite far away from the real action. Because the real action is on an API, right? You're just consuming XML. So there's two ways you can skin this cat, right? If you have a client app, it means they already gave you the API. So you already have the API because on the client application, right? But again, sometimes if you try to load up the client application, it gets a bit dodgy because there's configuration stuff, that things that might be hard-coded. Again, if they had a bit of understanding of security, they might obfuscate some stuff. You know, they might use some JavaScript, you know, whatever, equivalent .NET to break the thing. So the best place to always go is to inject yourself, right, into the client process and actually use the fact that you are inside the client process to manipulate it, right? So this is one of the things that I've done with O2, because you have to remember that O2 is a codification of my brain, right? I basically grabbed everything that I wanted to do, every script, every technique that I knew, and I kind of codified it, right? So I used to do a lot of stuff on .NET. I used to be a big defender of sandboxing, and then I realized I was the only one who cared, right? And .NET and Java are your corpse, right, on your sandboxing problem, right? And that's why I don't have a lot of faith on JavaScript sandboxing, because if .NET and Java failed, I don't think so, but hey, no. No, I was the guy who going, full trust is really bad, right? And then, you know, nobody cared. And the Java guys used to laugh at me. And then I said, look at Java, it's the same shit, you know. The security manager is disabled. And they go, oh, yeah, okay. But, you know, nothing has happened, right? So why bother, right? So basically, what I have here is something which is pretty cool, which is, and this, okay, so the thing about .NET and O2, it mainly runs on Windows, although there's a bunch of stuff that runs on a Mac, right? You know, and so that you believe me. See, natively on a Mac. Although except that the Mono guys decided to use the set text, so there's actually, you know, some of the APIs don't work 100%, but there's actually a fork that you can use if you want, right? For the Mac guys, there you go, full-blown REPL, executing, creating text boxes, manipulating, there you go, right? So it works on the Mac. So, you know, basically there's this really cool tool here, whoops, which is called the inject O2. So, and basically, so what this is a little tool that I can select in the process and I can inject O2 into another process, which is pretty sweet, right? Because what it allows me to do is it allows me to have total control over the other process, which is great when you want to attack a server, right, using the client application, because the client application already knows how to talk to the server, right? So sometimes the only thing you have to do to attack an application is literally to just enable everything, right? Because then, you know, you already have the client API to connect to it, right? So in this particular case, let me go to link pad to show you what I mean by this. And I think link pad is actually 64. And all right, so you can see that what just happened here, right, behind the scenes is I created a remote thread on another process. I loaded the CLR, right? And now I have the O2 scripting environment, which is this dude here, running inside the same process link pad. Right? And the reason why this is cool is because now I can go and I can come in here, right? And I can get the open forms, which in this case you can see it's mine and it's link pad. So there's link pad. And this is basically a real-time, right? Can you see that? It changed? Right? This is a real-time object of the other guy, right? But of course, this is not very useful. What is useful is if I do this form, and I'm going fast because I want to show you the speed that you guys should be going, right? Once you get your head around of this, right? So now, what I have here, right, is I basically have access to all the controls that exist in that guy there, right? There you go, there's all the controls. There's nothing I cannot do at this stage, right? So for the ladies, right, since users, you know, usually don't like, are not a nice world, you can have a pink link pad, right? Because I can change every single control. You know, if you want basically to make them all invisible, you can just go visible equals to false, yada yada. And you can add new controls, you can take controls, and you'll see in a second once I start manipulating GUIs, you can do the same thing here, right? But link pad is not our target, right? Our target is actually the client application, is this dude here, right? The stock trader guy. That's the guy we want, right? So let's go here, let's find the stock trader, which is there. So I'm now going to inject the O2 scripting environment into stock trader. By the way, you can inject any .NET app, right, that you want, right? It's just the scripting environment is nice because now you're scripting inside that process. Right? I think it's actually stock 62. And, okay, so now...
Do you not have a way to detect automatically?
Oh, the other process can detect that you've done that?
No, I'm asking, do you not have a way?
To detect what?
Well, because you have to choose it inside your system.
You should have detected it. To be honest, I think there's a bug in there. That thing should have detected that it was 64 or not. It's just because Microsoft screwed up so badly, right, with the 34. Well, I think Linux probably not as bad, but There's this, it's crazy. You have like this matrix now where you have to have a process that is either 32 or .NET CLR 2.0 or 4 or 4.5, right? No, 2, 4, 4.5, right? So you have to be sure, and it's 32 or 64 bits, right? And you might have 64 processes that actually can consume 32 bits. No. So yeah, there's a couple of variations in there, right? And when you do that kind of injection, it matters, right? What you do. Okay, so now, this is a cool thing now. We are now inside the same process of that guy. Now, this is a WPF application. I could manipulate the application, but in this case, I don't really want manipulate application. What I want is I want to access its APIs. So what I have here is I already have a little script that I can just quickly show you, and basically, where's my stock trader? And scripts. So basically, you can do is I can now access the APIs from the inside. Okay, so let's just take a look at this script here, so you guys can, So those are the dependencies, right? That's just the DLLs that I'm using. I'm loading up. So that's the stock trader DLL exe. That's the actual presentation, and this is actually .NET. What's it called? Windows WPF stuff, and this is basically the two runs that actually have the contract. Okay, so you can see that I'm able to grab, because they have a static value of their business service layer, I was able to grab an object, and I can actually invoke, right, including the fact that I actually have IntelliSense, right, into their own APIs, right, which is pretty cool, right? If you're hacking, you might as well get used to actually having IntelliSense into their own world, right? So you can see that I actually can log in, right? That's me logging in from here, okay? So what just happened was so imagine like there's a client app, right? It doesn't know what's going on. I injected myself into it, and I just use its own APIs to log in into that app. So actually, so far that's pretty benign, right? Because that's the same thing as going to the GUI and logging in, and you can basically confirm that I'm logged in if you, come on, wake up. Wait, you should be alive. Wait, what's going on with this guy? Okay, so you are logged in, and you, what's going on with this guy? Okay, okay, I think it's just a refresh issue. Yeah, so there you go, it's a level WPF, right, refresh thing. Alright, so you can see that I'm actually logged in as that user, right? Okay, so just you can see, I can log out, right? I'm logged out, I go back here, I log myself back in, and I'm now, log in as that particular user, right? Oh, I know, okay, I know what the problem actually. I know what the problem is, right? I logged in, but I haven't assigned the user session, all right? That's why you actually see that little thing. That's my next demo, all right? So now I'm going to set a particular user. So what I'm going to do here is, and that's the thing. So that stock trader login object is actually the object that I want to set. So I think now you should be, there you go. Okay, so now I'm logged in as user ID 2, right? So you can see that now I'm manipulating the application. And now I come in here and I can become user ID 3. And now look at this, user ID 3, right? And I can become user ID 4. So you just realize that what I've just done here is I just found a vulnerability that if I actually set the account that I want, I can actually become any of the users, right, that exists on the application. In fact, it's even cooler, right? Because you can actually grab this object here, which is basically this stock trader login user info is actually the client-side object, managed object, right? That's their use. So if you use one of your two APIs and you go show info, right? And you go like this. So you actually see now I got a little pop-up, right? That actually has information about the current user. I can actually, in fact, I can populate it if you guys want to see it. User ID 12, okay? And now I'm logged in. Okay? And you can see that this guy here, if I open up this information again. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm accessing the client, there you go. So see, look, that's my object. So now this is pretty cool, right? Because I can come in here. Look, if I actually change this value, I'm actually changing who I am. Look at that. I'm user ID 11. If I change this value to demo user, I'm now the demo user, and I can see its account, its portfolio, stuff like that, right? Remember that this is a demo app designed to show how to do client-side stuff, right? Now, the vulnerability is not on the client app. Like, the thing about this is that this kind of attack, you just use the client app as a lever, right? Because you're attacking the web service. You're attacking the server. It just happens to be that all the APIs happen when the client is easy to use that. But it's a pretty cool technique to actually use. It's a bit like making a zombie, right? It's a bit like, grabbing the attack and go, ooh, now you're attacking, grabbing the client and so you're attacking the server, right? So when I grabbed this, I then went to codify. So I found that the vulnerabilities was actually on the web services, and that's when I wrote these unit tests. So these unit tests show you the vulnerabilities that I was exploiting by manipulating the client-side application, right? It actually gets worse. You can actually make trades with negative values, right? You can actually do all sorts of really cool stuff. And the best one is actually very typical on multi-devices, is that if you try to go to the website, remember when I was fuzzing the website? None of them work, right? Because the fuzzing was basically hitting a lot of the cross-site scripting protection. So what's interesting about in that particular fuzzing example is that when we actually try to fuzz the application, there was a huge amount, like the site protection is basically this kind of stuff, right? It's basically that. What's it called? So this site at the moment has the kind of the cross-site scripting protection default, right? So ironically, you cannot put a cross-site scripting to the website, which is okay, right? Because reasonably protected. But you can put a cross-site scripting payload through the client app, right? Which goes to the web services, and then you attack the website, which is pretty cool. In this case, you can actually put a cross-site scripting payload on the particular user, right? And then wait for the user to access, and then put the payloads in there. But this is the kind of stuff that I use and I codify, right? So what I want to show you next is how I would write a login sequence, again, using this kind of interactive login environment that I basically have with O2, right? So the way it works is you guys grab O2, right? And by the way, O2 has, gazillions of scripts, right? And it has gazillions of APIs, has gazillions of stuff. So there's support for all sorts of crazy things in there. There's support for all sorts of crazy APIs, right? It's so like, I know you guys are using on O2 because if you don't email me or put a block, an email, I think on a mailing list, I know you're not using it because you're going to get lost, right? I get lost, right? So, So, and that's why I do the search, right? And that's how I find stuff. So, but my point of O2 is to make it really easy to use. Like when you have the right questions to ask, right? And to make it really easy to scale and distribute, right? So this is basically the environment that I create, right? So this is basically, I don't know if you guys know What Thing or Selenium. It's kind of like the same thing, or now WebKit. The WebKit is the same thing, or now Karma on JavaScript. It's basically browser automation. The idea of this one is that you can basically write scripts that automate the browser, right? And O2 has a whole part of static analysis that I won't have time to get into, right? But if you guys are into static analysis, there's also a lot of good stuff in there that you guys can access, right? So basically, you can see that what I'm doing is, as I write down here, the results show on top, right? And this is, what I found, what's really interesting, is these days, it's faster for me to codify my analysis than to even do it by hand. Because I now have the ability that almost as I understand the application, as I get the application into my kind of mental model, I'm actually creating an API. So I go like this. So I want this, I want to log in. What do? I go, okay, return IE.links, right? And then I got my links there. So what happens is you get this kind of interactive environment. It's called REPL, right? It's basically read, evaluate, execute, loop. Something like that, right? Read, execute, loop, evaluate, print. There you go. Read, execute, loop, something like that. Print, REPL. And basically, so you can see that the point is you do something, you get some output. You do something, you get some output, and you're building a script as you go along, and when you finish the script, you slap it on the unit test, bang, you're done. Right? So you can see that I got my links, I got all the links at the top, and I can basically grab the link here, I can basically now, and I always do this, I always return the link, so I get a field that I actually grab the right index, and then, You can see if I put a bad one, it doesn't show up. So I can basically go like this. There's also this little thing you can do. You can flash, which is always good for demos to say, I'm going to click there, right? So that it doesn't go too fast. And if you want to do that, you can go IE. But then when you're writing it, you probably want to go IE.disable flashing, because at this time you have a mojo going on here, right? And the way I look at it is that anything that takes more than 500 milliseconds, you lost your mojo, right? There's a groove that you have, right? That once you go beyond kind of a second, 2 seconds, you lost, they lost it, right? And if you look at the thinking behind Angular and Karma and some of the guys who are doing like really hardcore development, is the same thing, right? You want to be like in the groove, right? So my point is that, when you're doing this stuff, you want to be fast, snazzy, and so I got my link. So what you want to do, you want to click on the link, right? And it's and you might laugh at the millisecond thing, but okay, half a second, but it's like the Git stuff, right? There's a difference when you can code at this speed versus when you have to compile, press F5, wait, look, go back, compile, bug, go there, and then I think, up there, like this is just, it's just like, might as well. All right, so that's why. So I wrote most of my coding in here, right? I found this more productive Visual Studio, right? In a lot of cases, because I'm just faster and more efficient, right? Although for JavaScript, I tend to use WebStorm and fast Sublime text and stuff like that. And sometimes Visual Studio, because some things Visual Studio is pretty cool. All right, so I got my link, I've clicked on it. So now you can see that, where am I? I'm going to execute it. So that basically clicked it. So now I'm there, right? I'm on the login page. So you now go IE.fields. And by the way, if you guys don't know extension methods, in .NET, it's like, it's like the prototype stuff in JavaScript or the Python things extension. So I can create any method on any class. So I can create an API that the logic is you should be able to go out for a drink, wake up, sit down, and when you said IE.something, it should be what you expect, right? So, and so this gives me the ability to rewrite an API so it kind of flows in a way that you think you would do, right? So I got my fields, so you can see that I execute this, and now I got my 2 fields, which is main, context, text, password. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go IE.field, and then I'm going to basically put a value in it. So there you go, there's my value, right? And then you can see that it's still, pretty quick. Oh, that was the password, sorry. There you go, password there. And you can also manipulate it here. And by the way, you can also do it live here if you wanted to, but it's not that much fun, right? Because it's kind of like, you want it programmatically, so you can see that it's there. It's also cool because you can see all the different properties and things like that. Although if you want to do that, I would actually inject jQuery if they don't have jQuery already in there, right? So one of the things I do is if I'm testing a site that doesn't have jQuery, the first thing I do on the browser is inject jQuery into that browser so I can use jQuery to write the payloads. Much nicer, right? And then, so basically, and you can also do a lot of this stuff in jQuery, right? Okay, so now I'm going to go my field, and now I'm going to go my value. So now this is, sorry. And this is my field value, okay? And then the last thing I want is I want an IE, I want my button, which you kind of can slowly see that, it kind of tries to find by name and by text and stuff like that, so usually it's a good match. And I'm going to click on the button, right? So there you go, so there is an automation, okay? But that's not very useful, right? Because it doesn't scale. So what I want to do is I want to make all of that into a Lambda method, right? And this was the point that until I discovered this, I was about to ditch .NET for Java, right? But once I found that I could do this, because I was so, not Java, sorry, Python. I was so jealous of the def, if I could just define a function and use it without having to go to another class. Then you have to compile to do the thing, right? You can just come in here, look, and you go log in, username, plus password, and then I'm going to slap all that stuff in there, and then you can see that now you can see, look, there you go, my nice little Lambda method that I can now just go username and then password, and then now I can just log in like that. So you can see that now goes to the whole thing and does like that. If I now put a valid user ID, I should be able to log in into the application.
The other way around.
And you're absolutely right. There you go. You're actually following it. So I'm not going that fast. So there you go. So that's that thing. Of course, that's, you know, and the point, right? The point I'm trying to make is that for a while, I used to feel really guilty when I was doing an assessment because I was spending 50%, 70% of my time writing scripts and then creating a report. And I was like, this is weird. Why am I writing so many scripts when I'm doing the assessment? Right? And then I realized that every app is different, right? Every app has its own queer things that I can't you know, automate without customization. So that's how I arrived here. Because the point of this is not that you want to do it this. This is just like the beginning, right? So the next thing you want to do is you want to start manipulating the GUI and creating environments. So for example, one of the things that you want to do is you want to say, actually, you know what? At the top, why don't I, so this is basically, so the way you think about this is that this script gets given this panel here, right? And that panel is the one at the top, which basically what it means is that at the moment, right, I'm programming here, right? And basically, if I want to program, if I want to make this into a separate tool, right, what I need to do is, what's going on here? Wait. Yeah, a second. What happened there? Oh, I cannot find, oh yeah. There. I created a guy. Alright, there you go. And there it is, right? So the difference is, when you want to make this generic, right, what you do is you replace the top panel with the title of the form, in this case, util login, and you call it pop-up window. There's like 5 variations of that. There's open form, open new form. It's just that pop-up window is always the one I kind of arrived to, but you can go open new form, right? But, and this is basically that, right? So now that's a standalone form, right? And you could also, basically, you can go package crew and script as standalone executable, and now that guy is a standalone exe, right? That basically you can send to somebody, right? So that was the stuff that I've done last year, which is pretty cool. So you can see it's 3 megabytes, right? So that 3 megabytes contains all the automation, right, to do that kind of stuff. And you can write a really complex script, and you can actually send that. And this actually runs with no dependencies, which is pretty cool. Right? You can actually see that it actually runs completely, literally it's one executable that has everything, right? So, and that one doesn't run on Mac because there's no freaking browser, right? Compatible, but if you use other things, like the other type of analysis, because the real power for this is not this. The real power is when you start to go, well, actually what I want is I want a data grid, right? Because I want to register all my login attempts so I can visualize my stuff. So you can go to the top panel and you can say var data grid view equals top panel, and you can basically you can insert above, below, left, right, and you can insert a panel, right? So you can see that what happens now is I got, oh, that doesn't show very well there. Actually, let me just bring you back here. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to insert a panel to the left. I usually left to the right, actually, sorry. So that's the browser. The white one is the browser. The one is empty because I haven't added anything. So I'm going to add a data grid view. You can add tree views. You can add any kind of .NET control. In fact, anything that's a .NET control you can add. You can even grab stuff from other .NET applications, slop it in here, right? And basically, there is my data grid, right? Okay, the data grid doesn't have a lot. Let's add a column to it. So let's add some columns. And the columns might be, you know, payloads, response, and timing, for example, right? And I can see that there it is, right? Nice little data grid. And now what you do with the data grid, you populate it here. So you go add, you know, to the data grid view, add row. And now this is where you put your payload. In this case, that would be payload. And then you put the timing, and you put the response, right? And you put some, you know, some timings here, right? And now you can see that I will get a little row in there, right, after the login is completed. Now you guys want to see this completed, that was the script I was writing before, which is basically this one here. So this script, remember when you guys were seeing that? That's exactly what that was, right? And you guys should now be able to kind of read this script, where you have my panel independently, I add the IE, I add the data grid, this opens login page, this logs out, this logs in, right, with the one we just wrote. This is the one that does the analysis. Like, this is the one where, depending on the response, I can start to say, well, I failed my login, I logged in okay, I trigger an XSS protection, I trigger something, right? And then below, I add my columns, I grab the FuzzDB from another script, so I can actually grab the whole FuzzDB, and then I can run the entire set of payloads in there. And that's what we need to give developers, right? That's what you trigger from unit tests, and that's how we scale the developers. We don't give them one variation of SQL injection, we give them 200 or 150 variations. It says, you have to pass all of this, right? And because that's the point. So suddenly the developers understand, ooh, so it's not just about, you know, protecting against single ticks or whatever. It's about doing it properly, right? So that's kind of browser automation. So if you guys are delivering PDFs, you're missing a trick by not doing this, because you can be adding much more value to your customer. If you're buying reports, you should be demanding this, because it's much more expensive to review a PDF than to consume this stuff, right? So that's the kind of stuff that, you know, I do with the O2 platform, right? Now, this is dynamic analysis, right? The other thing I want to quickly show you guys is what I also do with, so this is dynamic analysis, this is doing runtime stuff. But the point of this environment, as you probably noticed, that this is a full-blown C# environment. There's nothing I cannot do, but it's also, it's very easy to script and to augment new things, right? So for example, just for sake of brevity, right? This is a script that I quickly create that gives me all the ASPX pages on a particular site. So for example, I can quickly go and do a quick authentication check on this site and open every single page, but also see the source code below and see what's going on. Again, little things make a massive difference, right, when you're assessing sites. And when you start to connect the dots and you start mapping these to URLs and then analyzing the MVC controllers and then doing Java analysis so you can figure out where the hell the Spring MVC stuff is or whatever framework guy's analyzing, you know, you create little GUIs like this because it makes your life easier. And if you look at this, you can see basically how it's done. You add a tree view, you add some nodes, the files is basically a folder, which is a string, .files, the extension, .true, which is recursive, and then, there you go. That's the tree view with all the files from one folder, with the particular extensions recursively searched, right? And again, I called that F for a while, and then I came back next day going .f. So it's like .files, that's what I'm doing, right? It makes sense. But all of this is actually compiled dynamically, so you can actually modify a bunch of this stuff if you wanted to. Right? Now, this is dynamic stuff. One of the other really cool things that O2 has, and a very quick history, O2 came from static analysis world. I used to work for Ounce Labs, like now he's IBM, AppScan thingy, and I was the guy that get given like a 10,000 report, findings things, and I make sense of it. So I started writing scripts for analyzing that. So basically, there's a huge amount of stuff in here for IBM, for Fortify, for check marks, and for static analysis, but also there's this thing here called the method streams. So the method streams is probably like, if there's one innovation that I could say that the O2 platform probably has, real innovation, is this thing, right? Now, I want to see if you guys can spot something interesting about this particular file, right? And this is basically one of the vulnerabilities, right? Now I'm going to show you here, and I recreated all the method streams, and basically, where are you? Okay, so let me show you this file, see if you guys spot anything interesting about this file, right? So this is the web service. This is one of the vulnerabilities I have on that unit test, right? So this is the problem. There's my user ID, there's my holding ID, there's my order, and we can see I got my trade service. I'm going to call the cell, which is actually here. The cell calls the place order, which is there, and then there's all my code of the place order. You can now see there's an authentication to make sure that I'm logged in, and then this guy's going to call the create order, and then it's kind of there, and then there's the process order sync. That's called from up there. Now, do you guys spot anything interesting about this particular file? Sorry? Okay, but from the structure, right? So what you have, if you look at the top, you have the class, trade services BCL. That's actually implementing the interface, right? And there's two methods there, right? There is the cell and there's the input text, which I call from above. See there, input text. So there's my input text, thingy, which is basically kind of, what the hell is this? There you go. Okay. Right there. So you can see that the input text and this input text there, right? And then there is this other class called trade services, we implement this, which is the one that the cell calls here, right? And then that placeholder is right there. Like anything kind of interesting about this file that happens to have all the code in sequence? For the guys who have reviewed code, what is usually the thing you do when you grab a particular method like that? Like right click. Well, that's what you have here. Sorry? Almost, right? So if you look, usually what you do, right? You grab the first method when you find it, right? You go right click, view implementation, right? And that opens another file, right? And then you go right click, find usages or view implementation, and then you open another file, right? So this, in reality, is on 5 or 6 different files on disk. Right? So what I did with static analysis was I grabbed a call flow execution map and I used refactoring to create one file that has all the source code that is relevant to the start location. Now if you guys do the static analysis or if you're reading code, this will save you 50 to 80% of your time. In fact, I found myself and other guys who we print out this and you just read the code like that. In fact, I once showed this to a guy and he's like, bloody hell, he only spends hours printing out the entire source code, manually cutting every function and gluing it together, right? And you laugh, but if you had to analyze 500,000 lines of code, and you only had to analyze the web services, which is a small chunk of the 500,000 lines of code, you would do that. Because, or else, your brain just blows up, right? So this is a great way to do static analysis. In fact, there's even a little module that actually starts to follow data. So this is a pretty cool innovation that you guys have on your new platform. With a bit of documentation. Not a lot. How much time do I have?
You blow your time already.
Oh really? Oh, okay. So,
but don't worry.
Yeah, it's a little faster.
Okay. So I just want to say a couple more little things, right? So I think the O2 platform is a really interesting project, right? Not just from the technology, but from the concept. And I do think I'm a bit ahead of the market. Right? But I do think the market is going that direction, right? And I think it's a great place for you guys to start thinking like this, because I think it would put yourself in a place where, from a developer, you're adding a lot of value, right? Now, a couple more little things I want to just quickly talk about. You guys know what this is?
Raspberry.
All right, cool. Right? And then you probably recognize some of this. Right? You guys know what that is?
Android MK.
Cool. So this is a full-blown, again, Android computer, right? Cool, and a screen for Arduino, right? Now, these little fuckers, these guys came from China, right? Now, my view is that there's a revolution going on in the world. If you guys haven't noticed, we're going back to local manufacturing. I think that if you guys have any connections with anybody who married in Portugal, Portugal needs to get into this, right? It's really sad for me to see Portugal in such a depressed state when there's so much talent here, right? And this is happening, and Portugal should be a powerhouse in the creation of this, because we actually are really good and really clever. In fact, Nuno used to do this kind of stuff when I was actually, doing other things at university, right? He was the guy actually hacking Linux, right? We should be really good at this. I should be able to buy these in Portugal. I shouldn't have to go to China to buy this, right? So I think there's a massive revolution going on in the next couple of years, and Portugal is going to be either going to miss it completely because we've been sleepwalking and complaining that we're so depressed, or actually do something about it and be a player, right? Because this is big. Right? And the other thing I'm doing is I'm teaching kids this thing called Code Club, which I highly recommend you guys to do. I'm doing this thing where I'm teaching kids how to program. There's the program called Scratch. I'm getting them into Python. It's pretty cool, right? And I also grab all my books and I lump them in a local cafe so the kids can go in there and read the books. And it's pretty sweet. So that's one of the things that I really think you guys should be involved in, right? And this is a big revolution. This is happening, right? If you guys want a great book to read, there's a book called Makers. We've got Chris Anderson, and it really shows you that the interconnection of the world, it's really going to make a massive difference. And finally, right, this is actually, in a way, it's a bit sad, right, because This is actually the presentation I've done, I can't believe, man, 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Right? Now, in a way, right, okay, it's only 168 slides, right? So, I really think you guys should read it, because it's actually not bad, right? And it's actually just pretty done, it's done like that, kind of interactive style. It's pretty cool. It has a bunch of cool ideas in there, right? It's kind of on the web. The thing I was trying to leave you this is, I think this will happen. And by the way, again, Brazil is beating our ass, right? They're motivated, they have focus, right? They have stamina, right? And they believe more in Portugal than we do, which is freaking crazy. They believe more in Portuguese. Like, we go there, we say they speak Brazilian, no, they say we speak Portuguese, right? Which is kind of really crazy, and we are depressed, right? And basically, what I think we should do is we should lead the way, right? Because we are a great sector. We're innovative, we're fresh, we have new ideas, we believe, we share information. So I think that one of these days, the same thing we did with drugs, we should do with hacking, right? Portugal should become the Switzerland of hacking, right? We better have a nice little law that says anybody who does anything hacking, it doesn't matter, you know, nothing will happen to you, we won't prosecute it, and basically we should create a nice industry because we have talent. And this doesn't cost any money, right? All it takes is a politician with balls this big, right? Or a women politician, right? To basically pass this simple law. Because what happens is, and you guys know that, right? We are in such a sorry state as the rest of the world is. And if we can basically legalize hacking in Portugal, hacking, I mean testing stuff and not be depending on some crazy law that makes every single computer user criminal, you know, and let the other guy define what's authorized or not, right? Which is the laws we have, and same thing in England, right? England is the same thing, right? So I think it's a great idea, and I think you guys should embrace it. So I run out of time, but you know, and by the way, be involved with OWASP, right? OWASP is a great organization. You know, there's some stuff going on that you guys don't have to care about, but what matters is OWASP is one of those organizations that you can meet anybody that matters in our industry from OWASP. And it has passionate people that care about stuff, that come to different countries, and there's a great community, and I'm next week in Milan, meeting some other guys, going, you know, talking about this stuff, and it's a great community, and you guys need to be more involved. And there is no entry fee, there's nothing, it's just about can you actually do something, right? It's a great place to be involved in. And you get to meet a lot of great people. So, thank you, and sorry for it.
You're welcome. Okay, is there some questions?
Write some unit tests.
When you try to test, do you ever deliver PDFs also?
I used to. That's why I basically went. You know, when IBM bought.
Sorry, did you deliver the Excel files, the PDFs also?
No, I used to do that. I used to basically give massive PDFs, right, to the customer, right, and that's where I got frustrated because I realized that they didn't know what to do with it, right. So what I found interesting, right, was especially because I was doing a lot of advanced analysis, right. I went to a stage where I was giving really hard apps, right. I went to this stage where, you know, like I couldn't find SQL injection to save my life because you know you have a problem when you ask for documentation and you go like, whoa, where's our controllers? Like, whoa, you guys know about this shit, right? So what happened was I found that I went from showing how bad they were to showing how good they were, which was really interesting. I found that what I would do with my scripts was to say, hey, you know, you remember when I asked you guys where your attack surface was and you guys showed me this? Well, I found a couple more, and these are all the tests I've done. Right? And then it was really interesting. So it was almost like the size of my data that I gave the client didn't reduce. What reduced was, well, basically what changed was the kind of analysis that I was doing that, you know, basically, you know, made it a big difference. So yeah, no, that's why I took a year off, you know, literally work. I locked myself in a hotel for a month to make O2 kind of reality, right? Because I was fed up of delivering PDFs, right? So, any more questions? All right. Well, actually, I have one more little thing to show, which is really cool. And I talked about this to those guys, right? Which I don't think they believe me, right? Is one of the things I was able to do with O2 is hijack Windows in Windows. So basically, you can actually now grab any Windows and you can mix and match depending from different processes. right? So it's basically, it's pretty cool. So basically what it is basically you can go into this application and there's a little tool here. And basically there's a little tool that you guys can actually use to do this stuff, and I'll show you a practical application. So there's a little thing. So what you can do is you can basically, you can grab like, you know, another window, right? And then take a screenshot and then bring it here. So you can see it disappeared from there. It's now here, right? And this works with anything, right? So you can go to Visual Studio, right? And you can say, oh, sorry, can I borrow like the Solution Explorer, right? You can go there, right? And you can now see, now I can hijack it, right? Now what's really cool is this is alive, right? So actually, look, see, I can actually control, right? It's actually still things inside Visual Studio, right? Which is pretty sweet, right? Now, why? Okay, first time I showed this, people are going, why? Right? There's actually a couple of really cool applications. I created some really nice GUIs based on this, but I was also able to, for example, especially when you want to grab Chrome, I was able to do this. So what you're going to see here is basically, and this is my environment, right? This is basically Chrome, right? Hijacked, right? So I start Chrome driver, right? And I started Chrome, and I grab those two windows, right? And then I slap one in there, and I'm going to grab that guy and put it down here, and then I got to give you a record that this guy is now controlling that one. See, so now that's pretty cool, right? Because now that's a standalone process, right? That has a .NET app codifying Google natively, right? That's actually the Google process, right? There, and I have a command-exe down there, right? Also under control, right? So that's pretty cool, right? And I use that for development, right? I use that, for example, to create something like this. So if you go WebStorm, right, you can actually see that. Now, this is another cool example where I'm going to start WebStorm. If you guys know WebStorm, the editor. WebStorm doesn't have native Google inside of it, but now I have a little app that has WebStorm on the left, right, and Google Chrome on the right, right, which is now pretty cool because then I have, and this is the unit test stuff, right, then I have Karma running automatically on AngularJS. So that means that every time I make a change on my code, it runs automatically, right? And it loads up over there. So it's kind of a really nice integrated environment. Now what's cool about this, right, is I give this to developers and they're my friends. I'm not the guy they want to kill, right? I'm the guy who's giving them better tools. And that's my point. We have to start becoming tanks. And we have to become an added value. And we have to give developers the great tools that we have. There you go.
Okay.